Alright, so here's a little video on pattern cutting. I've got my patterns laid out on this strip of tin here. In this case, I'm cutting apples. You can see the pattern for a pear here. The way I lay them out on the strip is just to sort of tessellate them, but loosely, so that the pattern is flipped so that it will use as little sheet as possible. But I still want to leave a little bit of a space in between the pieces, so I'm not cutting right close to the line. Use a large pair of snips here. I just rest them on my thigh, and that gives me leverage to push, and I can just push with my body weight instead of just having to use my hands. If I tilt the shears a little bit, I can get the piece to clear the bottom of the lower jaw. And you can also curve. You can throw a little bit of a curve in there if you need, but these are pretty close. So I'll throw a little bit of a curve in there, and you can see that runs pretty well. So basically, I just cut them all free now. And once they're free, I will continue to clean them up a little bit. So I'm not trying to cut close to not trying to cut right to the line here. I'm just cutting close. And getting rid of particularly the corners, because when you go to cut a curve, you know, these organic shapes, when you go to cut a curve, all of that excess tin, this excess tin in the corner here will fight and resist the shears. So just nip off a lot of the excess. Makes it much easier to cut. One thing you'll notice, I'm cutting right-handed. If you're a lefty, you know, I get it. And particularly with these organic shapes like this, you could get away cutting left-handed. But the problem left-handed is unless you have a particularly left-handed shears, which you can get left-handed shears, but I don't have them. I just have these regular pattern shears. And so the right jaw will obscure the line. If I'm cutting left-handed, I can't see the line as I go around. On organic shapes like this, it's not that big of a deal. But just learn to cut right-handed. It's not that hard, and you'll pick it up pretty quickly. It's a lot easier. The grip I use, these shears are curved so that I could, if I wanted to, I could go around this outside curve and then flip the shears over and come back into this inside curve. In practice, it takes time. You know, I've got hundreds of these pieces to cut, so I don't really want to spend the kind of time it takes to go real slow and careful like that. The other problem is when you pull your shears out and put them back in, you run the risk of leaving a meat hook on there. It's much better if you can really push the shears into the cut the entire time. You won't get that meat hook. So it's much better if I can always have pressure in there. Of course, you take the shears out and put them back in, you're losing that positive pressure. So here at the bottom of this fruit, I've got a little W-like shape. And here again, you know, this is one way to cut it, is to come into the curve, and then the tin will cut a little bit past the tips. I keep my thumb in here, which allows me a really high degree of control. I can make sure that I'm not cutting more than I intend to. Come back the other way, and just keeping the tips a little bit from the corner. You can nip it, and it'll hang there, and you can break that off. That's a fairly clean cut, and it's one way to do it. Another way you can do it is if I just come up to that corner, come up to that inside corner, I can tilt the shears and cut right out of that corner. And that's another way to do it. You can see there that it works just fine. So if I keep my cuts smooth, the other thing is I don't have to run out of line there. I don't have to turn these over for the inside corner. If I keep my cut nice and smooth and long and just make sure I'm moving, swinging my shears out. So here you can see the shears swing out to make that curve. And the other thing I can do is I can tilt them away from the line to help make that curve. And if I do that smoothly and cleanly, I can cut an outside curve even with the curve of the shears going the wrong way. All right, so that one's, I'll file up. I can make it a little bit neater, just file it up. It's a little bit of a mess from all the in and out that I was doing. But there you go, you get the idea. I've got, as I say, hundreds of these apples to cut. There's, or fruit, these, total pieces. It's not hundreds of the apples. There's 50, I think 53 of the apples, but hundreds of total pieces. And so I don't want to spend a lot of extra time cutting. So I leave my shears in one direction. And the thing is, with these organic shapes, you don't have to be right on the line precisely. You could drift a little bit. It'll actually add to the piece. It'll make each one look, they'll clearly be the same, but it just have less of a mechanical look. If there's some slight variation from one to the other, it won't look mechanical like stamped out shapes would tend to look sort of lifeless and mechanical. So little subtle variations, just like in a drawing, when your line thickness is always the same, can make the drawing look more mechanical. A little variety in line thickness kind of helps the drawing look better. All right, so lefties, you got to cut lefty. Okay, so you got to cut lefty. Well, you don't have to. As I said, just learn to cut right-handed. But let's say you can't learn to cut right-handed. You can get in there. I mean, you can do this. I can do this as a lefty. I could come around and you'll see that the curl is going to come to the inside. So by twisting the shears out, I can make that curl go to the outside. I'll just bend it. So you just bend it over. This, if it starts to get in the way, you just bend it over. So I can shoot around, and the same thing here. Now when I come to this part, this spot, I want to go, now I can't go down under like you do with the right hand. I swing the shears down and away. I'm doing this left-handed, so I have to come up and towards myself. So rather than going down and away, I have to come up and toward myself. Now, again, being organic shapes, I can get away with it. You can't see the line, so it's just an intimation. Is it going to match the other fruit? Yeah, sure. It'll. Those are clearly the same. The same set. But if you're doing something like a lantern or something where you have a really precise, you need a really precise cut so that one piece will fit another. If you're talking about regular geometrical shapes rather than organic shapes, much easier to do it with the right hand. You'll be able to see them. Well, here's a close up of me just nipping. I hope they're all in frame. Just gonna work right over this bucket here and see what happens. So you can sort of use this. You know, you can sort of watch this and pick up on some of the subtle things that I'm doing. I like to shear it in one go, but sometimes when I'm laying them out on the strip, they get a little close to one another, and I have to choose one line to shear. Just for something fun to do, I'll do this one both hands, both flipping the shears so that you can see what that would be. The reason I would use this method is for accuracy. If I wanted to be a little more accurate, I could slow down and really make sure that the line was followed. All right, guys, the rest of this is just some sped up footage of me nipping out the remaining apples. Appreciate you watching. I hope you got something out of it. The next video will be on repoussing these, embossing them in a wooden swedge block. So, got to carve up a wooden swedge block and then give these a little bit of shape. All right, see you next time.